morning, and thank you everyone for joining the Godel Tech Talks series. And hopefully you'll find today really informative and enjoyable. And thanks to Finbarr for agreeing to take on this morning's talk. How are you doing, Finbarr? Are you okay this morning?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, cheers, Paul.
Good stuff. I think what we're going to do is we're going to kick off with running a quick poll, which we're going to use for an interactive discussion later on today. And that poll is going to be around what's stopping your organisation from starting your digital transformation journey. Bit of a mouthful. And the options you'll see come up will be skills and capability, time, budget, nothing currently in process, or nothing already completed. So we'll post that poll on the screen. Whilst we're doing that, Finbarr, it'd be great if you could give a bit of an intro to yourself and what you're going to be talking about today.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, Finbarr Joy, currently engaged as an advisor, long time CTO, CIO, everywhere from tech to gaming, telco, media, advertising, legal, outfits such as BT, William Hill, Labara, Superbet. Before crossing the floor into this end user world, I was lucky to have had 15 years in tech. So there at the start with Answer Digital, and yeah, way back in the midst of time, even got a couple of years in with Netscape at the dawn of all of this interweb madness. So I don't know about all you all, but I think there's never been a better time to be working in tech. And it's talk is going to explore some observations, hopefully useful for those of you at the beginning of this journey. I should stress, definitely not recipes and prescriptions, but hopefully the start of a good conversation. Thanks, Paul.
Good stuff. Sounds great. And I think with all of these sessions, it's always great if we can get as much interaction as possible. So if people want to post their questions in the group chat, we'll be hosting a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So please do join in, post your questions, and hopefully we can get some interactive conversation going at the end. So with that in mind, Finbarr, if you are happy to go, it'd be great for you to kick off.
Cheers, Paul. Yeah, can you guys make it possible for me to share my screen? What's currently happening at the moment? Yeah, the inevitable Zoom faff. Hopefully you can see that. Digital transformation.
Yep, that's on the screen, yeah.
Good, right, we're ready to go.
Good
so
stuff.
Yeah, thanks again. I guess usually, the context, it's usual, given such a big topic, it's usual just to reflect on what we think the context is, what the frames of reference are. And these are the usual wraparounds that you'll see when an organization expresses its intent to pursue digital transformation. For me, arguably, these things in and of themselves, they do not transform the organization. And I think it's helpful to create this distinction between those things which give us a better IT infrastructure and whether or not at the same time we are moving the organization on to compete digitally. So many examples, it seems we're hypnotized by how remarkable the tools are and the scale of change needed to adopt those tools. We kind of do avoid that elephant in the room, that the core business, nothing's really changed. So for me, we need to confront that, technology is table stakes. As difficult and stretching as that is, it's only the minimum benchmark. And I'd suggest the last few years especially have demonstrated, we're going to be masters of technology, whatever our history. So it's, what is that new business direction powered by tech that engages the transformation and brings about those changes in the organization? It can be a sobering exercise to challenge the organization on whether it actually has a why. Very often it's around, feeling that the world is moving on. Maybe analysts have been specific, we've engaged some analysts who have told us that go in this direction. We fear the shadow of the consumer internet giants encroaching on our territory, but is there an explicit strategy? When it comes to the strategy discussion, there's an unfortunate tendency for many IT teams to dig themselves in as a mere supplier to an entity that they call the business. And the whole strategy discussion is one of those themes that's assumed to be purely in the hands of this notional business. And you'll hear the leaders of the IT team, protesting, well, we can't be expected to get IT right. They never lead with a business strategy. Genuinely believe, that strategy should be everyone's business, and certainly the CIO, the CTO. Failure to get on top of this, means you're typically soon victim to initiatives driven by whatever themes your executive colleagues are reading in the airline magazines this month. So I'm sure all of these, should be using blockchain this month. You get these prompters. Where's our cloud journey? One happy byproduct of the recent travel restrictions, I think, means that there's less of this going on, although God knows what they're Googling instead. For most organizations, the transformation is a response. It's usually a defensive response to feeling behind the curve when it comes to digital. And so one profound pattern underlying that tendency is a failure to recognize the need for dealing with continuous change. So, many of you are underway with your third, fourth, even fifth transformation by now. And for too many companies, it's seen as one big push to get through before returning to business as usual. It's interesting to see that it's actually those organizations struggling to cope with this new normal, for instance, that are also falling into that pattern. And a useful model here is the Red Queen hypothesis, coined in the field of evolutionary biology. States that to survive an evolving system, one must co-evolve with the best traits to survive that system. Taken from Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, the Red Queen tells Alice as they run against each other, while it takes all the running they can do to keep in the same place, if you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that. So just think for a minute of the programs, the portfolios, the teams and the resources and the partners. More than likely, the sum total is only keeping you where you already are. The pivot and the lever to give you true distance has not yet been engaged. So it's too much that goes on in the name of strategy that merely, posits a utopian vision, or, projects some great grand goal. Describing a destination is no substitute for developing a comprehensive approach for how the organization will achieve its stated goals. And we see lots of new projects added to the backlog, but what are we diverting our core focus to? What will we stop doing and substitute with this? And I would say, in terms of setting that whole direction, I don't know how many of you have come across the whole Wardley mapping technique. I can't possibly do it justice in this brief overview, so I'm not even going to go there. But I strongly recommend you check that out in terms of, reorientating your organization's position in the marketplace and how you might take it forward. So the need for a strategy direction that's cognizant of your particular organization challenges. So let's assume we've nailed our direction and that's identified an innovation we need to pursue. Where do we do this? And there's no doubt that in the early days of a new direction especially, it can appear easier to make faster progress unhindered by the weight of the mothership, free from the business as usual distractions. And, we'll often set up this kind of digital lab environment. As we've all painfully discovered over the last year, however, the separation of a quarantine creates a divide. And I believe the organization that does this is sacrificing long-term competitive advantage for short-term profitability. So the next 2 quarters P&L, just too precious to dedicate key resources to longer-term priorities. So instead, we isolate the exercise, we recruit a bunch of new people, we don't divert from the core business, if you like, and they kind of scattergun experiments. Certainly give us a great direction, certainly give us the confidence, they give us the plan, the momentum, if you like, to head in this new direction. But as an ongoing environment, I've seen it be extremely problematic and can result in nothing more than innovation theatre, actually diluting the overall focus. And it's bad for the company because innovation does become quarantined away. It's not actually a contributor to organisational performance. And, rather than quarantining it away, why isn't it part of every team's pursuit? It should be a part of every team's endeavour to deliver innovation in how it's working. My experience, with any kind of gathering of IT professionals is there's a number of projects relating to fundamental elements such as e-commerce, such as marketing workflow, community building. But if we take one snapshot, and this is only one very random snapshot, there are very few domains that actually don't have off-the-shelf software already available. So if you're not pursuing innovation, then why are you building this stuff? So I think it's a good call out to, reflect on whether the pieces you're building are actually necessary to compete, and whether what we're doing is actually investing in innovation. Similarly, benchmarking. Again, the whole mapping technique is priceless for this. Where are we putting our resource investment into, especially where we're building software? And it can often be the case that people are launching a project now whose fundamental componentry, if you like, is the stuff of maybe even decades ago, but we're still building it. So there's a need to reorientate, reposition in terms of the business strategy, but also in terms of the technology strategy, whether we're actually investing in that leading edge that's going to give us any kind of advantage, and whether we're not wasting money on what are commodity technology capabilities. And one fundamental challenge is always the need to bring the legacy along. So we can't create anything meaningful if we don't utilize our core assets. So faced with this conundrum, many identify the need to refresh the legacy. So we'll move it to the cloud. But unfortunately, there can be a very problematic shape to how that's done. We're not going to deliver on the business agility requirement if the endpoint looks like this, literally lifted and shifted from our data center directly into the cloud. And of course, you get flavors of this, so there's blocks split out into separate clusters. Looks kind of cloudy, but it's actually a distributed monolith. And all we've done is increase our costs. So it's better instead to give ourselves the benefits of scalability and flexibility that underpin the rationale for cloud. And many rightly identify the architectural and design implications of this, but the team implications can often be overlooked. I'm sure many of you have come across the Conway's Law conundrum. You tend to get the shape of systems according to the shape of your teams. And we see everywhere these architectures, architecture designed by HR, if you like, and this won't give us our cloud native pattern. And the way these teams are mobilized is also a blocker to achieving any kind of useful digital outcome. You see a selection of these ring fenced into a project, and then that lucky project has to contend with other projects for the resources to go live as the delivery date nears. So as an example, let's consider these 4 projects heading for their finish line. They've got to schedule in the support of at least all of these other external teams. And it's very rare, I think, that all of the stars align, that all of that availability is right for each project to proceed as it should. So of course, shortcuts are taken. We do whatever it takes to hit the date. And the customer outcome is a long, long way away. So in terms of creating the conditions for success, I think it's easier to start with a small single team incorporating the multiple disciplines that can work in a cross-discipline fashion, and to reduce those external dependencies, and then to willfully constrain its boundary of concerns, so that the team has the headroom and scope to own its complete life cycle. And then in setting them up, ensure they've got meaningful targets. So there's usually a set of targets that a lot of IT teams will carry, and it begets, I think, you see a whole cottage industry of analysis and reporting to deal with, and unfortunately very little of it has an impact on the outcome for that end user. And this belongs to a world where the CIO is responsible for the smoothing of IT, but not outcomes. These projects come from somewhere else, and it's down to this team to deliver, if you like, nothing more than a delivery function. And there's typically dozens of detail metrics underneath each of these. If you've seen any of my talks before, you'll know I'm a big fan of this piece of work, and I make no apologies for including it time and again, because It's brutally simple to understand, but it is a wickedly high benchmark to achieve. The one that always stands out that that teams will struggle with on first glimpse, if you haven't seen it before, is this cycle time. So forever we've struggled with comparing relative pieces of work, and of course you can't, even within a single team. But what you can do is benchmark from the time that code is committed, when is it live, and that is directly comparable across teams. So the cycle time here is the time from code being committed to code being live. And again, if you haven't come across this, it's a fabulous piece of work, statistical relevance across literally thousands of teams and thousands of participants over a 4 or 5 years period. The State of DevOps report, it's the same people behind the State of DevOps report, definitely well worth a read. And the essential benchmarks are priceless because they give us a clear filter to run performance through, but they definitely enable us to get in the right shape to deliver software. And I highlight this because it's better to understand how to write software, to have done the organizational learning for knowing how to write software and then to scale, than it is to attempt to learn to write software while scaling it. Before engaging on this pursuit, challenge yourself with some honest assessments. Can you deliver software today? And the basic performance aspects of delivery, many organizations are left wanting. Can you create the right things? Have you got a predictable delivery pattern? Do you have delighted customers? And if not, they consider digital transformation, and in the IT context, cloud and DevOps, and there's often a worrying knee-jerk reaction at this point. When they'll reflect on perennially poor out experiences and launch a scaling initiative that attempts to address both how you deliver software and product performance and how you scale it across the organization. So, your mileage may vary, but I would suggest it's more scalable to first develop your capability to develop software and then to scale what you have learned. So how do we go about driving the changes we need? Top down with a pre-configured structure is very common. And while that can give us, again, some initial acceleration, you'll see that these exercises typically run out of steam after something like 18 to 24 months, because they don't bring the team along. They don't get that team level engagement to drive it through. Similarly, bottom up, you'll see this happen through especially a lot of IT organizations that will do, for instance, adopting agile in pursuit of, creating a snowball effect that takes on through the rest of the organization. It most often just triggers, the corporate antibodies that will stop this change, especially at the middle management layer. So that the lack of engagement, and especially the executive and middle management, we don't get anywhere with that either. So instead, we try to take as much of a representative sample of the teams affected by this through into a new shape of working. We provide them support, and this gives us our canary in the coal mine, if you like. So setting this team underway, what are we learning about the nature of this change? What are we learning about what it means for our organizational structure, for our culture? Making sure that we're not lifting and shifting a model from somewhere else that maybe we've seen, because there are always idiosyncrasies to each organization's ways of working, and absolute idiosyncrasies to changing the regular regime of work. Throughout this scaling, you need to identify the mix of internal versus external team assignment. So, you definitely need to, take increasing levels of ownership for your digital destiny and that tech ownership. But while you need that hands-on, it's unlikely you're going to make this whole route purely through your own organic internal means. So it's absolutely critical to work with partners along the way, and in finding those partners, ensure that they're complementary to your culture, complementary to your approach, and actually adding value to your outcome, accelerating your journey because of their experience. Never use day rate as the only measure of performance. So we've headed straight into the tech and some of the interesting, team implications, and started to suggest, setting these teams up as multidisciplinary entities, delivering now more incrementally. But hang on a minute, what about the capability for that? How do we align all of this if you're setting these individual teams up? So, you ensure, ideally, you've got a consistent unifying product vision and direction. So each of those teams has, has responsibility for product within it. So away from the traditional enterprise IT model or delivering product to the business, but being responsible for product within the team. And you make sure that the work's being managed according to the smallest possible feedback loops of progress. So never more than days away from feedback actually from the end customer. So we obviously need to make sure we're synchronizing these efforts, and that means talking to each other. You could call this a scrum of scrums if you like, but whatever. You just need to make sure it's easy to cross-reference. And the shorter the product hops, the easier the synchronization. So we're starting to head into, you know, lots of challenging implications here. And in the way that teams work, this starts to then nudge on to, we've got another elephant in the room, that what does this mean for the changes in the culture of the organization? And of course, there's lots of management frameworks for inculcating culture change, and this is just a reference to one of them, worth a read if you get the chance. But you know, common to all is the need to live and breathe the change, expose the people to different experiences, and above all, persist. And it's not until teams have lived the sequence a few times that it actually becomes real and natural. So it's not about buying foosball tables and sticking funky posters on the wall or relentless webinars. You've got to get the changes underway, give the teams the experiences of learning from those changes and experiencing for themselves that this is actually real rather than something they're being told to do. Which brings me to your responsibility as a leader to support the team through this transition. It's not a structure and a set of procedures that can lift and shift from somewhere else, and your organization must build the organizational muscle for learning once we get those teams underway. So, you know, your input to support, bring back to the organization and help that team give it the air cover it needs to succeed. So it's the influence of exactly, you know, this kind of group in those leadership roles that's most material to this. I've seen organizations trumpet the move to create a collaborative environment, and then in the same breath, the same team update, if you like, start an inter-team fight on who caused last weekend's outage. So, you know, blame storming. When you role model curiosity and interest rather than blame, you're more likely to engender the atmosphere for sharing and learning to occur. So in summary, you know, digital transformation needs to be more than about, you know, however spectacular IT upgrades. You need to reorientate for digital outcomes for the business. What are the reimagined digital outcomes for your customers? What are those pain points that you're addressing? Map the propositions to the market, be situationally aware, scenario test those plays, and recognize that, you know, technology, speed, adaptability are actually table stakes. You know, does your current strategy include these key decisions, or is it just this year's collection of enterprise spending plans given a keyword refresh? You know, some kind of plan to spend more and somehow get better. So thank you for your attention during that. I hope there's some useful observations there. Please, by all means, bear these works in mind to dive deeper. And by all means, please do get in touch. Back over to you guys. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Finbarr. That was some really useful content there. So I appreciate you sharing that for everyone on the event today. I've got quite a few kind of questions that have been pushed through into the chat as we've been going through. So what I'll do, Finbarr, I'll walk them through kind of one by one, and then we'll see how many we manage to get through. So thanks for everyone posted in the main chat. So the first one that I've got here in front of me, you mentioned transformation's response to falling behind. Mm-hmm. Is there any way that you can identify when you're falling behind, or if you're staying ahead of that curve?
Well, yeah, it will sound too glib, so please do push back. But you know, the fundamental is we're losing market share. We are suddenly in a world where you know, other entrants are within our market, and we're clearly not competing. So market share is the abundant you know, measure, whether that be an immediate usage of what you use if you're an online service, or whether it be in a straightforward switch that what you provision in a physical world, other people are now seeking through digital means. So for instance, retailers, you know, people are switching to Amazon. Mm-hmm. So you know, track the market, absolutely track the market, but be aware, be attuned to the digital equivalence of what you're doing. But usually the market will tell you, pretty quick, if that's not too glib.
No, not at all. And to be honest, it moves quite nicely to one of the other questions we got on the group here, which is how much emphasis do you place on, I suppose, monitoring KPIs during kind of wide scale transformations?
Well, especially with the 4 from Accelerate, that they are key, and they tell us whether we're heading in anything like the right direction. And I genuinely do find that all the other measures that people pursue, really are those watermelon measures. They're the things that make us look good, but actually nothing's changing. Green on the outside, bright red on the inside. How far away are we from being able to pursue a cycle time of 1 hour? So the code is committed, it's live in an hour. Okay, what's the work that we're doing to build the automation environment that makes that true? What's the work that we're doing to blend the skills in our teams to make sure that that's true? So it's only, by keeping those measures front and center, can we release on demand? They're the genuine measures. So again, another reason why we do this team by team, the effort to get a team into the right shape for that will bring great learning, therefore somewhat more straightforward to send a second team down that path.
Fantastic. No, thanks for that. We've got a couple here that's been voted up as we've been going through, and you've been answering to the last point. What do you think will be the key driver to convince board level execs to invest in long-term digital transformation when the next quarter's kind of P&L are so critical, particularly given perhaps the current climate?
Yeah. So, the longer it goes on, the easier the examples are. So, it is worth considering, and it's a good reference point to bring to the exec's attention. We are at least a quarter of a century into this now. So, when you look at the last 6 months and, the whole reaction to, we're now working remotely, all of these things, we're now buying and selling online, is causing a real problem for the retail environments. All of that capability was available 25 years ago, It's that now the compound speed, if you like, has accelerated somewhat. So, I think most organizations do recognize there are very few endeavors now that can't be accelerated by software. Even if what you're selling is not an online thing, it's typically within your cycle of work, the things you are responsible for, technology plays a part. Whether that be the automation of processes or whether it be the addition of the Internet of Things sensoring capability and monitoring and control around that. But it's cast that shadow of the future. Do the imagine if there aren't already digital incumbents kind of on your doorstep, which there's very few markets that's not true, by the way. But if they're not, then maybe paint that picture of what would happen if they did. Referring to the abundant pattern for the last 25 years as in the inevitability of that.
No, great answer. I've got a question here from Rob. Do you think in current circumstances, driving transformation within teams that are working from home will slow down the rate of transformation a business can potentially achieve?
So I think this is obviously organizational specific, but certainly in my experience, this year has been fascinating. So you definitely saw a dip in performance in the first month or two while everybody was figuring out what the hell is going on. But certainly in the context I've been involved in, we've seen an acceleration since. So I don't think the separation necessarily does, but we've got to invest in the connectivity, invest in the digital touch points to make sure there's still a cohesive team. In some respects, it potentially makes the pursuit of that target easier. So I think in the disconnect in the real world, if you like, when everybody's in the same office buildings, there's almost an inclination to take it for granted, the alignment, when this forces the pursuit of making sure we're aligned. So I think it brings a better focus actually to it. So if we can come out of the other end of this having established better working patterns and better work-life patterns, then I think it actually has got the potential to accelerate transformation. And I've certainly seen teams come out the other end in even a stronger position than they were because of that pursuit of getting it right, which maybe we might have been taken for granted when we were in the office.
Do you think some businesses might even have to, I suppose, look at things about almost like digital burnout and how they might address that in terms of people might have kind of team meetings and things like that?
Yeah, so if you look at what some organizations are doing, especially the consumer internet, pure consumer internet players, they're tending to suggest you need at least a blend of the two. So let's make it possible for people to do both, but let's raise an assumption that we do still get together occasionally, yeah, as a team, eyeball to eyeball, recognize each other as people, recognizing that that is tough, and maybe at least support both for teams that want to be able to do that. But there's definitely something in the flexibility which is interesting.
No, definitely. We've got quite a few questions in. Thanks for everyone for posting. We've got kind of several more to get through, so I'll go through kind of piece by piece. I've got a question here, Finbarr, around, do you think prioritizing digital transformation compromises your team's ability to innovate?
Compromises, good grief. There's something going very badly wrong if that's true. So the whole point of the focus and the intent is to raise the innovation level. So reflect on what we said there about, when we're setting about a transformation, is it because we've identified a business opportunity, because we've mapped our context, therefore we know we need to build something new? Otherwise, what are we investing in? We should just be taking the off-the-shelf product as a straightforward integration program. So if we've got that far, then that should be innovation. And if those two are in conflict with each other, there's something very badly wrong. That's a reset. That's a hard reset needed there. It'd be hard to consider how those two could get in contrast to each other.
No, fantastic. I've got one here from James Loveridge. It says, from my experience, CEOs struggle to justify allocating budget to transformational work in inverted commas, as they're usually focused on what we class as a quick ROI attached to delivery. How do you balance, I suppose, working on revenue generating products and investing in the long-term stability of the platform? How do you kind of balance those two?
Yeah. So, I think in that CEO conversation, it's great to understand, what the organization believes its growth efforts are. So if it's not this, what is a growth effort? And most usually the growth effort is about organically multiplying what we're already doing. And I think, especially in the world of digital, that's going to run out of steam. That's not going to get you the escape velocity to keep up. So I think in a world where, some of our investment, is it 1%, 0.5% has to go on what's the refresh that says, we still compete 10 years from now, 3 years from now, even if you look at current benchmarks, then maybe 1% is worth spending on that. And then to look after that investment. So, okay, in a world where we can't guarantee ROI, and to look after that investment, we pursue results. So, can we demonstrate a customer result within 2 weeks? It tells us something. We've got the feedback that tells us something. We're onto something here. All we've done is shown them a product data sheet. All we've done is shown them a demo. All we've done is show them a dumb online representation of this with a price attached to it. But it got a response. That response tells us we need to carry on. We've got attraction. So, build the attraction, let that feedback drive the pursuit, and keep investing in those small increments, but have options for that. One of those options will bear fruit, and I would certainly put my money on that being a lot more cost effective than what might be the long-term programs that have got the investment currently, which I suspect very few of them are delivering return on investment. So, rather than burning all of that big cash, why not, siphon a little to that kind of stream and demonstrate a different way of working and improve the return through different means, but probably a lot more efficiently in the medium term.
No, fantastic. I think that this other question we've got, I think you actually already answered it, which is kind of the balance between kind of being transformational and getting stuff done. So I think we've kind of covered that off in the last one.
And it's a good question, and I guess it recognises that that's an unfortunate pattern in many organisations. It's almost a transformation takes on a life of its own. As in, we all now need to change to this new working model, and that becomes the outcome, which is fundamentally flawed, versus we're setting about a transformation because we want to create a different outcome for our customers. So all of the work should be targeted in that direction. So the whole point is to deliver on the customer outcome, not to progress a transformation. But I think that question is reflecting on, you do see that pattern, that it becomes a distraction from earning revenue. And again, that's a great indicator for we are fundamentally on the wrong path here. If there isn't a crystal clear guide path to the work we're doing is giving us a demonstrable outcome within weeks, then we need a reset. We need to reset the work. The work we're doing might be interesting, but it's not going to deliver anything useful. Where we've got that dichotomy,
As you say, it comes like breaking it down into that kind of series of incremental chunks, so the business can see the value as well longer term.
So in this particular area, we launched a new team, pursue it in a different area. Within weeks, we've got great customer feedback, It's better than the feedback we're getting on our core product. We're not making any money yet, but look at this feedback. This is phenomenal. We're in the right direction. So the work we're doing is clearly the right work. But if we're not bringing the customer feedback in, then guess what? You're in a world of pain. You know, we're starting another debate altogether. You know, that belongs to that world of you know, the shift left.
Yes.
Don't shift left. It was a completely artificial construct to shift it right. The work was always left. Yeah, prove the work that you're doing while you're doing it was always a classic approach, albeit it gets branded, you know, agile, etc. Now it was always a classic engineering approach, but we kind of lost our way in enterprise IT with some of that. You know, how do we make work cheap? Somehow ended up being a production line of work. So, you know, entirely artificial. Keep testing that what you're doing is the right thing and take the customer's input.
Fantastic. I've got one here around, it's more kind of sense about themes. So you showed some really good themes you went through the presentation on digital transformation over the decades. Interesting to see what you think the themes are for, say, 2020 to 2030, and what key things you probably see as being a bit of a focus at
that's a flattering question, isn't it? I mean, look, you know, this is me broadcasting from my spare room here. A lot more glamorous environment than this if I knew the answer to that question. Yeah, I mean, it's you know, the edge at the moment. It really is, you know, the whole artificial intelligence domain. Yeah. So even if just, you know, if we get to the practicalities of regular machine learning, increasingly, it's the advantage, if you like. So whatever we're doing, there's almost an inclination now to, unless we're building machine learning in, why we bother building this in the first place? As in, we should be building the ability to continuously optimize, and machine learning gives us that. The tool sets are getting easier and easier. The availability of it is getting easier and easier. Practically commoditized in the cloud now. So I think that's clearly going to be an abundant pattern. It's probably the only one I'm more confident about. You know, it's still an all. We're still on the cloud journey, amazingly. You know, all these years in, 15 years in. So that will continue to be significant, I think, in terms of acceleration. Other than that, you know, potentially the world of IoT. So as more things gain sensor capability, and as we build better edge and cloud capability to deal with what that data is telling us, then the combined intelligence of all of that is clearly going to be a thing. So yeah, those broad trends, he says, completely the question.
No, appreciate the insights. Got another one here which talks about, again, comes back to the exec and kind of the board question previously. In your experience, what's the best way to change or challenge the mindset of senior execs that potentially might not understand the benefits of agile delivery?
So I feel the pain from that individual. You know, the fundamentally first thing is don't call it agile. You know, drop the terminology. It's extremely problematic. It does you no favor whatsoever. Those execs will Google it and then be profoundly confused. So don't call it that. You understand the pattern, which is the key thing. Bring the pattern to life. So have the conversation with your exec. They will be frustrated with everything going on in the organization, but you can use your team as an example of how to lead the way. And why not have the conversation of, imagine if we had a customer outcome in 2 weeks? And in my experience, most you know, regular execs, if you like, are unfamiliar with digital and these ways of working, will profess, you know, surprise at that, or, you know, disbelief. So that's your ability to, you know, leverage an exercise where you prove it. So, you know, fire up an exercise where you can get something done. So on the basis that, you know, this is coming from a place where you kind of know the model, but your executive is not sponsoring you, then have that kind of conversation. I genuinely would urge you to drop the terminology. That's the biggest problem. There's a terminology that we've all accumulated around all of this. Focus on the outcome. Imagine if we could deliver to a customer outcome within 2 weeks. Let that be the conversation. A series of imagine ifs, and it's about the way we're working. Imagine if all of our functions could work together. Imagine if there's no distinct split between IT and another part of the business. Imagine if your finance analyst could get the information they needed just at the click of a button, because they knew exactly how to do it and knew how to work in that fashion. So you want the implications of that model. Think about the downstream implications of it, and, you know, bring that scenario to life in the executive conversation.
Fantastic. I've got one here that's almost could potentially take us down a rabbit hole, but it's a one nonetheless. In your experience, how much does, I suppose, the culture affect the success of the transformation itself, and perhaps how can you impact that with more kind of working from home as well?
Yeah, you know, it is the biggest impediment. So, you know, it's always the most difficult aspect. the reason why I highlighted the, live it rather than try and push it. It's the one where you need the most executive patience, absolutely. There's another scenario you can paint where, given any kind of change, there's always a typical response amongst a group of individuals. Yeah, so any organization that's several hundred individuals, you'll get approximately a third who will be like demanding this, and they'll be delighted, brilliant, let's go, and they'll just pull it through. There'll be some that will be quizzical, and there'll be some that will actually be depressed by this move. Yeah, and it's, you cannot bulldoze your way through this. So it's how you pull the teams through, how you create the conditions for them to test and learn. But the culture thing is just, it's got to be incessant. It's got to be role modeled from the top. It is the hardest thing to get right. There's no two ways about it. So start with the business outcome changes, build up the sponsorship, and get the culture change in parallel, as making sure the executive is aware. Without the culture change, you're not going to achieve any of this. You need the collaboration to be a fundamental part of it. The test and learn muscles for test and learn, if you like, to be embedded.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Got an interesting one here, because obviously with your experience in terms of working across a multitude of different sectors, what's been the kind of the common blocker potentially across those for what you class as kind of true digital transformation?
Yeah, it's a culture thing again. Absolutely common to all is the culture thing. And there is a tendency for people to classify, on very broad terms, there's a kind of consumer internet, new funky company culture, and there's a corporate classic traditional, bureaucratic culture, and create those as two kind of stereotypes. It's actually worse than that, in that because it's a change. So don't assume a set of assumed digital behaviors. Yeah, the only thing that's true is collaboration. How do we make it easy to collaborate? How do we make it easy to get feedback from the customer? And how do we make it easy to rinse that feedback through the organization as quickly as possible? So all of these approaches are about, yeah, but only take that principle in mind, and then how do we learn as a team to do this? What's the issues in our organization? So it's extremely problematic when people lift and shift patterns. The Spotify example. There's abundant references that even Spotify are not using Spotify routes. So it's extremely problematic to suggest there's some kind of borg culture you can just inject to an organization. So you just kind of got to get it underway and test and learn. And it's always the most difficult thing. It's always the most difficult thing, regardless of the vertical.
Fantastic. I've got another one from Rob around how often do you get teams together to review the transformation strategy, just to see, I suppose, how you're progressing, what needs updating, changing, or is it just a constant kind of feedback loop?
Yeah, so there is a constant feedback loop, but in terms of calibrating, are we going in fundamentally the wrong or fundamentally the right direction? Then yeah, quarterly. So have a good quarterly check-in. There's an assumption that you are continually taking a pulse, but have a good quarterly check-in. Is this working? So think about the indicators. Are we heading in the right direction for that? And about what is it telling you about the journey that you're on? And if you're not taking customer feedback, then that's your next change for the next quarter.
I've got another one here, Finbarr, which is in your experience, where do you encounter the most resistance to this type of transformation? Is it the tech teams, senior, middle management, or potentially even the customers themselves?
The one that is going to sound very pejorative, and I don't mean to be, but it's an outcome of the circumstances of too many transformations. Is that rather than it being a particular part of the organization, it does tend to be the middle management. Yeah. So in both the so-called IT and technical team and in the so-called business team, and it's because the transformation typically is driven top down or bottom up. Yeah. So it will be an exec who gets minded to, we need to compete and or we need to get on board with this, or it will be some kind of snowball effort from the ground up. So yeah, it tends to be so that's why I was highlighting the need to get together an end-to-end team. Yeah, make the functions part of the learning, include the functions in that end-to-end team as far as you can. So we're taking the learning in stages.
No, fantastic. And I suppose, I know we've had the poll question running in the background. Has that come through to you now in terms of the kind of the aggregated answers? Can you see that from your side?
I can't. What am I looking at? I'm looking at the
It's just been
Yeah.
pushed up from onto my screen here. So, well, firstly, thanks for everyone who's been answering as we've been going through the session today. So it looks like, I suppose, as a base, it says, so the answers and that people could give was around, I suppose, what's stopping your organisation from starting a digital transformation journey. The answers were split across skills, capability, time, budget, nothing, because it's currently in process, or nothing because it's already completed. With the line share, the results, it looks like currently in process, which is the main one, which is, so it looks like there's less blockers there, which is fantastic. Second kind of answer coming through is on the skills and capability side. Quite an interesting kind of mix of answers there. Is that perhaps something you would have expected, Finbarr, from what you've seen yourself firsthand?
Yeah, exactly. It just reflects the challenge really. So therefore, the need to secure that sponsorship, to get underway and get the learning underway. And it does reflect, there's no pat answers to any of this. All we can do is, share each other's experiences and, help find some ways through. Take the incremental learnings, but by God, avoid the terminology.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a really good point. People can get hung up on the different ways of badging things up. I've got another question here from James. It says, sort of from your experience, do you find internal engineers prefer working on transformational work or prefer revenue critical products?
Well, they tend to prefer the transformational, as in, we're building something new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'd worry about separating them. They should be the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You should be pointing your transformation at your revenue critical. It's kind of, what is this team delivering to innovate? So what's today our critical revenue remains our critical revenue. So yeah, as far as possible, make them the same. But yeah, people tend to enjoy working on the new, don't they, if it's development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. I've got another question here. It's more, I suppose, addressing, one of the second answers we had, which is kind of around the skills gap and perhaps what you might have been seeing from a UK perspective. They basically said, do you think the technical skills gap in the UK will hold kind of UK organisations back on their digital transformation efforts? And if so, what sort of solutions do you think can counteract this?
So, I highlighted the partnering element is absolutely key. Don't make the bland assumption that this is just all something you're going to be able to pull off for yourself, both in terms of capability and capacity. So you've got to look to partnering. We've all just learned, that's entirely possible globally. So I think many organizations struggled with that for a time. We've never had a better demonstration of that than the last few months. We're all connected through networks. So and assume that the shortage is chronic. Therefore, invest in what is it about your environment that you can make amazing for great technology talent. So give yourselves a chance to hire that great talent, and it is nothing to do with all of those elements around funky place to be, or a great color scheme in the building, or whatever, free food in the world where we used to be in the office. It's more about how interesting is the work. Are you giving them discretion? Are you giving them an interesting target to head for? Can they see the results of their work heading straight to the customer outcome? Make all of those things true and find yourself in a world where you're recruiting with the best of them. You're competing toe to toe with the best. Create a great environment for great people to thrive and do good work in. But it is absolutely chronic, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. I mean,
No.
I'm a parent. I can see how woeful the education system is when it comes to any kind of technology backing it all, compared to the other great industrial continents on the world, if you like. This country's struggling on that whole thing. That's a big worry, actually. So yeah, we need to work very hard to make it easy for people to pick up these skills and do what we can, to get the best talent.
Have you seen much in terms of from the organisations you've worked at? Because obviously you see that the pool of talent seems to be going down from an education standpoint. The number of people taking computer science and other kind of tech-related kind of disciplines. But retraining, I've seen some organisations tackle it, some well, some better than others. Have you seen much from your experience?
So I was just going to call out some of the best talent I've seen over the last couple of years have been people who don't have a computer science degree, You know, switched from completely alien domains,
Yeah.
but had the passion and the enthusiasm, and that does carry you an awful long way, especially in a world where we need to increasingly gain more skills. So it's not just about, you know, I am a back-end developer or I am a front-end developer. You've got to actually pick up a mix of skills. So, you know, maybe some of the traditional routes no longer apply. So I think, you know, taking curious people from other domains is definitely needed. And it's, you know, I've seen that being useful, definitely.
You can almost see the benefits of just having, I suppose, diversity. Just we've seen the benefits of that just across across the industry, where that just brings new ideas, different perspectives as well, longer term. Fantastic. We've got a few questions left in the kind of the time we've got, and I appreciate everyone posting as we've been going through. I've got another one here from Rob, which is, I suppose, how would you approach a non-technical CEO? It might touch on the answer you gave before a little bit around, I suppose, driving output with some execs.
So, you know, ideally they are non-technical, in that, you know, the technical ones are frankly dangerous. So
I get constant challenge.
To my, you know, but yeah, you know, it really is about, you know, consider your business outcomes, consider what your organization delivers to its market. And if you're not already threatened by digital, which very few examples of, but, you know, if you're not, then maybe just have that imagination exercise. So, you know, assume connectivity will improve, because it will. You know, assume processing power will improve, because it will. You know, assume edge computing will improve, because it will. So, you know, just the same as, you know, Amazon invested in all of this stuff in 1996, and now they're completely untouchable. Yeah. They made some very obvious assumptions. This is clearly going to happen. It's more convenient than anything else. It's clearly going to happen. So, you know, put yourself in the same frame of reference for our market, for our product. What is likely to occur? So if we assume a digital element to this, if we improve the outcome for the customer, is suddenly a lot more convenient, a lot more straightforward, a lot cheaper, a lot more enjoyable. You know, think about those scenarios, and then have that conversation about that outcome scenario. Don't talk about technology, don't talk about approach. Talk about, imagine if somebody had this in our market. Albeit it's usually more straightforward to point to somebody who's already doing it in your market, and, you know, likelihood of their growth, you know, the trend of their growth, and just point to that contrast.
No, fantastic. Got a question here from Rob, which is, I suppose, it relates to the poll we've asked. So the majority of people answered, you know, nothing already completed. Could you say that, I suppose, digital transformation is constant, or is there perhaps a period of downtime before kind of you go again on the next period?
Again, the whole reason why I was highlighting the test and learn approach and going incrementally is to stop it being an episodic thing. That's the problem. You don't stop this and say, that's it, we've done. Consider the Red Queen pattern. Yeah, the world is changing. Consider how over the last 10 years the accelerating pace of change, and guess what, it's not slowing down. You know, so the fact that things will change under your feet, you know, continuously is a thing. So, you know, build your organization's planning into that, build a test and learn muscle, so it's not such a great big heave to make a change happen, because you're continually testing and learning. Yeah, you're not in a world of, we deliver a project on a date in 2 years from now. You're in a world of, what is our customer results telling us now? What does that mean we're going to change in the next 2 weeks? What commitment are we going to sign up to this quarter that changes that? And everything else is up for grabs. Everything else is up for grabs. Yeah, we will change, you know, techniques, tools, processes, people, whatever we need to, because we're pursuing the outcome. We've built the ability to measure that outcome and validate it continuously, rather than a great big heave-ho of a change, which is really problematic. Yeah.
No, fantastic. We're down to kind of our final question, and one from James, in terms of, from my experience, CEOs struggle to justify kind of allocating budget to transformation work. I suppose the question there is around, do you perhaps see more, I suppose, ROI being challenged a lot more frequently now?
Yeah, so, you know, it's I think that's down to, you know, the CIO, CTO to make clear how they can contribute to business outcomes. So, you know, don't be asking for a transformation. I want a transformation. You know, be asking for, you know, we are not competing on this basis. Our competitors got these outcomes. We need to do something similar. I have in mind a piece of work to get us underway with that. Can we run a test? Can I have the funding for a team to do something for a quarter? And get underway with that model. As you build momentum, you're then starting to look for we need to apply this change more broadly. But I wouldn't stand up and say we need a digital transformation. We need to fund a digital transformation. Would be the last thing you would do. Is, you know, set the pattern up and running, see what it tells you, point to it, demonstrate it, you know, highlight the need to replicate that to be more competitive.
Fantastic. Well, I think there's quite a series of questions we've got through, I think roughly about sort of 18 to 20 in total, and really do appreciate everyone's time and you know, focus really for putting these questions to yourself, Finbarr. And firstly, thank you to yourself. It's a very interesting, engaging conversation, so I appreciate your time today. In terms of, I suppose, people who wanted to find out a little bit more about yourself, where should they go and to kind of look up yourself? What's the best way to find that?
So LinkedIn's probably easiest.
Yeah.
I don't know if the slides are being shared, but you know
they certainly will. So we'll be sending the recording together with the slides afterwards for everyone as well. So we'll be circulating that after the meeting today.
No worries.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you very much for your time, and thanks for everyone that attended today. And we'll get all that content circulated. But again, thank you. Cheers, Finbarr.
Thank you.
Take care. Cheers.